Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 382. We've been talking a lot about the financials in the Jeffrey Epstein case, and we've talked a lot about how Jeffrey Epstein's money was managed by some of the most high-profile wealth management teams in the world. And one of those teams, which is one of the most high-profile and the most elite of the elite, is the J.P. Morgan wealth financing division. And these people were, involved with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. And their job was to create more wealth for their already ridiculously rich clients. And these people didn't care who these clients were. We've seen it with the FinCEN files and the Paradise Papers and WikiLeaks cables. And I mean, how much more evidence is needed at this point? How much more evidence has to be put out there for people to understand that these people inside of the banks, these higher ups, and the people in, the wealth management division, these are the real power brokers, not your politicians. What do you think? These politicians that are screwing around in Washington, D.C. right now as we speak are the real power brokers? How do you think they get elected, folks? Do you think that just that happens organically? They wake up one morning and they say to themselves, well, you know what? I think I'll be a senator. Or is there all sorts of money coming in from people like these bankers? Of course that's the case. All you have to do is to look at any one of the presidents, 46 included, their transition teams and their councils and their cabinets and their staff. It is littered with people from these banks and from these financial sector jobs. And that's just the way it always has been, right? These people, these bagmen, they provide all kinds of money. That's the lifeblood of this. How do you think you don't get elected with a couple of bucks in your war chest? No, the game is set up so common folks can't get elected. If you can't raise money and you can't get big dogs to jump on board from out of state, which I think should be done away with, by the way, then you have no chance of winning. All of the money that pours into these races from out of state is absurd. And we're seeing it right now in Georgia. The money that's being poured in from both sides is absolutely disgusting. Considering that 14 million of our fellow citizens just lost their unemployment insurance today due to the absolute moronic behavior of the president and Congress. But yet these people will still run around and act like they're doing the people's work. It is absurd. And, why should we expect anything less, though, right? That's just how this game has always been played, the dirty game of politics. And until we get our shit together as citizens and we realize that it's not our neighbor that's the problem. It's these people who are the problem. J.P. Morgans of the world who are the problem. The politicians that are bought and paid for by these corporatocracy oligarchs are the problem. Then we're just going to continue to get absolutely bum rushed by these people. Abused, treated like shit, trashed. Meanwhile, while they're giving you a 26% finance rate for a credit card, they're managing not only Jeffrey Epstein's money, but the scumbags at J.P. Morgan, like we're going to talk about tonight, managed Ghislaine Maxwell's money all the way up until 2015. Now remember, JP Morgan is definitely a very important topic when we're talking about the financial aspect of this whole entire thing. Jess Staley was in charge over at JP Morgan. He had a very tight relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And JP Morgan was Jeffrey Epstein's go-to bank for a very, very, very long time. And even after the whole entire situation with Epstein, even after Ghislaine Maxwell was named all over the papers, was accused by numerous girls, JP Morgan decided it would still manage her money. They'll bank her millions and they'll profit on a few points. Because at the end of the day, that's what really matters, right? Just the profits, nothing else. As if JP Morgan needed Ghislaine Maxwell's few more $1 million, right? No, it's just gravy train shit for them. It's just 20 more Lamborghinis. Or a quarter of a bonus for one of these shitbag executives that doesn't do anything anyway. But they had to have it, right? They had to have it. Doesn't matter that Ghislaine Maxwell is walking around glowing like the Toxic Avenger. They don't care. Give us some dough. We need more money. Our greed will rule the day. And why would the bankers and the financial sector act any different when the laws are in place for them to navigate them and maneuver like this? While I really dislike the financial sector, as you all know by now, I have even that much more of a distaste for the lawmakers who set the framework for all of these laws that these people backdoor, that these people manipulate, that these people finesse. And until we send people to D.C. who aren't willing to take money from out of state, who aren't willing to be bankrolled by people like Sheldon Adelson or George Soros, then we're going to keep running into this same old shit, same old nonsense, same old problems. But it doesn't seem like there's the will to change, right? Nobody wants to rock the boat. So let's just keep sending the same maniacs to D.C. and expect a different result. When in reality, we know that's not the case. We don't need to be able to see into the future. We don't need to be Nostradamus to know. But here we are. All right, so our article tonight is from Bloomberg.com. The headline, JP Morgan banked millions for Ghislaine Maxwell as it had for Epstein. This article was authored by Neil Weinberg on July 22nd, 2020. So, like usual, when we have a slow news day, I go to the archive and yank an article that I think would be a worthy addition to the catalog. And considering the ongoing conversation we have had recently about the financial aspect of this case, I figured it's a no-brainer that we throw this one in tonight, add it to the catalog, and, move forward through the weekend and hope for some new news to update the catalog with. But if that doesn't happen, that's cool because there's so much ground to cover in this case that there are so many articles that we can add to the catalog that will be worthwhile. So that's what we'll keep doing. We'll keep adding the context and we'll keep adding little pieces on to our conversation. Prosecutors who are probing accused sex offender Ghislaine Maxwell haven't identified the banks that helped her manage tens of millions of dollars. Yep, that's true. They've been pretty hush-hush about it. But I think all we really have to do is follow some of the breadcrumbs from the Virgin Islands, right? Is it 100% correct? No. Are all of those banks that were subpoenaed definitely banks that Maxwell was doing business with? No, we can't say that with certainty. But we do know that her and Epstein's finances were very much intertwined. Maybe not connected as in the same account where they're drawing money from, but they're making the same moves, right? As we see here, they have the same wealth management divisions managing their money. They're parking it in the same places. And I'm sure they're pouring a little water on it, like in Gremlins, to make it multiply as well together. And you see, even though that these institutions have not been named in the Ghislaine Maxwell case, we see what's going on in the Virgin Islands, and we know for a fact that at least this one, JP Morgan, is most assuredly one of the banks. One of them was JP Morgan Chase & Company, according to people familiar with the matter. And again, these people who are familiar with the matter, they obviously have a little bit of inside info to dish to Bloomberg, so that's cool. But if you do the putting the pieces together yourself, you can come up with some of the same results, right? We know that JP Morgan, Deutsche Bank, and a bunch of others, considering Ghislaine Maxwell, had money in over 20 banks, according to prosecutors. You know that there is going to be a lot of overlap. And I would, with a bank like JP Morgan, it just goes to the heart of the issue with Jess Staley once again. What exactly did Jess Staley know? Was he involved in the facilitation of these accounts being set up and then protecting these accounts when things went south? Furthermore, how can Barclays in good faith keep this man on? What in the hell is going on over at Barclays? And I get it, right? The means justifies the end. I understand what their argument will be. They already have enough problems with the pandemic. They don't want to lose more money. They don't want instability at the top. They'd rather have Jeffrey Epstein's pal, Jess Staley, hold down the fort as of now. But as soon as this starts to calm down, and hopefully the vaccine works, or however they bring this to heal, I think that Jess Staley most certainly is in big trouble here. I've been saying that for a very long time, and I still stick by that. Obviously, 2020 has been a crazy year. Once the pandemic started, all bets were off. Everything changed. Everything was different. But Jess Staley is still under investigation. We have not heard any word about that investigation for the most part. And as the investigation blooms here in America and the Virgin Islands, I think that things are going to get even more dicey for Jess Staley. There's no explanation for why he would keep Ghislaine Maxwell's accounts at JP Morgan. Don't you think as a financial institution or a bank, you would say to yourselves, look, I'm not doing business with these people. Are you kidding me right now? Wrong. Close those accounts out. Keep it moving. But no, these disgusting financial institutions are so worried about the bottom line, are so greedy, and so willing to do whatever it takes to make one extra buck that they don't care if they get into bed with a bipedal serpent like Ghislaine Maxwell with a cloud filled with Jeffrey Epstein's toxic shit hanging over her head. It's all justifiable to these people. That's another tie that Maxwell shares with Jeffrey Epstein, the late convicted sexual predator who was a longtime JP Morgan client. Oh yeah, just one tie, huh? Remember, this was back in July of 2020, but let's be real. If you think that's the only tie Ghislaine Maxwell had with Jeffrey Epstein, you most certainly have not been paying attention. And I have been of the mind that their finances are intertwined for a very long time. I've talked to a lot of people behind the scenes about that, and I've talked to some people who have an idea of how this kind of thing works. Maybe not so much as, behind the scenes working with Epstein, but how these sort of operations unfold. And it's very telling when the money is parked in the same institutions like this and being managed by the same group of people. The same thing was going on over at Deutsche Bank, by the way, as well. And that place is a den of scum and villainy. We could go on forever about how bad Deutsche Bank is when it comes to making sure that the people that they're doing business with aren't the worst of the worst. As much as I hate JP Morgan, I hate Deutsche Bank that much more. I mean, just look at the business deals they pass off to oligarchs all over places like Russia and Eastern Europe. Just look at the funky deals they did with Trump. I mean, I've said, how long have I said it here on this podcast as well? That those finances should have really been dug into. But nope, nobody did that either. They were busy playing slap ass, busy playing touch ass, busy playing politics, trying to toss a little bit of red meat to the loudest people, right? But the loudest of the people, they don't make up the majority of the people ever. So it was a big old waste of time when all of these banks could have been exposed. Epstein was known inside the biggest U.S. bank for helping steer many of his wealthy acquaintances to its private banking unit in New York, which offered discretion and tailored wealth management to rich clients. Helping steer, huh? Just again, he did it out of the kindness of his heart. What was Epstein getting on the flip side? Or was Epstein getting a kickback from these banks? And after he compiled the compromise on these people, he told them, look, part of the deal is now you have to park your money where I tell you to park your money. I don't have direct evidence of that, right? But it certainly is a relevant theory here that we have to look into, right? It's something that has to be considered, considering the blackmail angle of all of this. And I mean, as much as Epstein would like to portray himself as some sort of mensch when it comes to moving money and making money grow, we're talking about other seriously rich people too. All of these people decided that Epstein is the oracle from Omaha all of a sudden, and he's going to be the one to lead them to the promised land financially after they have all accrued wealth that was in the billions range. Now all of a sudden they need this idiot Jeffrey Epstein to help them, huh? So it's certainly an argument that could be made. It's certainly an avenue that has to be traveled down, and it's something that has to be looked at, just like everything else in this case. Nothing is ever what it seems, right? Every time we dig into something, it seems like, oh, well, that's a little weird. That took a weird turn. What's this person doing involved in this? Hey, how did that person end up in this story? And it's no different here when you're digging into these banks and you're digging into the other people that were involved in this. Maxwell had $10 million or more under management at JP Morgan Private Bank, according to two people with direct knowledge of the matter, one of whom said she was a client by 2009 or before. So that's when Jeffrey Epstein was absolutely embroiled in his troubles, right? The first round of troubles for Epstein right around that time. And Maxwell automatically becomes a client around that time, huh? Well, that's weird. Why would Maxwell become a client right around the time that Epstein is having these issues as far as criminally? And especially when Ghislaine Maxwell said, well, she had no contact with him. They weren't friends anymore. But they just happened to have their money parked at the same place, huh? Being managed by the same people, huh? I'm sure that was not facilitated by Epstein. I'm sure that had nothing to do with their very, very close relationship. The narrative that they want us to believe is very, very flimsy, folks. And it's very hard for me to not completely mock it at this point. After everything that we have learned, after all of the articles that we have read on air and all of the research that has went went on. And so all of the other content that has been provided by other people who are engaging in following this case as well. It's just, I mean, it's very clear what was occurring here. Very, very clear. Her money there was handled by a team that included several dozen relationship managers, advisors, and others who specialize in closely held businesses. The bank continued to work with her after Epstein moved funds to Deutsche Bank in 2013. So even after Epstein was booted out of JP Morgan, even after he took his dough and moved over to Deutsche Bank, they continued to do business with Ghislaine Maxwell, even though they knew that she was his sidekick, his co-conspirator, a general all-around scuzzbag and fellow child abuser. They still managed her money. They kept the bipedal serpent's nest egg, and they helped it grow. And who knows how many people were abused or paid off or threatened during this time. I mean, these banks, they have to have some sort of responsibility, right? You have all of these people involved, all of these relationship managers and this person and that person and the other person. You have the regulatory divisions of these institutions. And nobody knew, huh? Nobody had any idea what sort of person they were doing business with. That's what they would have you believe. Maxwell's finances are coming into focus after federal authorities in Manhattan accused her this month of conspiring with Epstein to sexually abuse minors, with prosecutors delving into how she funded her activities and lifestyle. Authorities require banks to provide a bulwark against financial crimes by filing reports of potentially suspicious activities. The reports aren't made public. Well, unless you're talking about the FinCEN files. And again, see how important the FinCEN files are and how large they loom in the overall narrative of the case here when we're talking about the financial portion and the Paradise Papers and the Panama Papers. All of that stuff must be understood before we can understand what Epstein and his cohorts were engaging in. You can't just half-ass understand what's going on here, unfortunately. I wish it was that kind of case. I wish this was the kind of case where you could just do a brief read of an article and be like, oh, yeah, I get the gist. All right. There's no way. There's zero chance. There's just too many players on the stage, and there are too many different threads that have to be pulled on. Epstein's financial dealings have haunted one global financial institution that didn't raise proper flags. New York's financial regulator this month faulted Deutsche Bank for inadequate supervision of Epstein's transactions several years after he pleaded guilty in Florida to soliciting prostitution from minors. Well, again, Deutsche Bank is the perfect place for Epstein. If you're a big-time scumbag and you want to park some dough somewhere, Deutsche Bank is the spot for you. Just take a look at their star-studded roster of scumbags. The closely held business unit inside JP Morgan's private bank works with clients who have substantial holdings in private business, real estate, and trusts. There, Maxwell kept her money in a fairly conventional JP Morgan portfolio of equities and funds, according to people with knowledge of the matter. So she had the Doskies there, right? She was holding the money there. She had all of her dough there. They were, well, not all of it, I should say, but a lot of her money there. They were managing it for her. They had it on point, and they knew what she was. But yet they kept managing this money. JP Morgan, Jess Staley, and all of these other people that were involved with her portfolio and her account, they knew what she was. And I just want to drive that point home. It's rather, all you have to do is a quick Google search or watch the news. They lived in New York when this happened, most of these people. They know the deal. But no, they still did business with her. One of the people said Maxwell had accounts at JP Morgan until at least 2015. That same year, she became embroiled in civil litigation with a woman who claimed Epstein abused her as a minor and that Maxwell had functioned as his madam, allegations that Maxwell denied. And we know that that's Virginia now at this point. And at that time, I'm guessing JP Morgan figured it was getting too hot, right? So they were like, all right, I guess it's time to bounce. Finally. Wait till the very last minute and then dip, huh? As if that's going to be enough to keep the toxic stench from drifting your way. Following Maxwell's arrest in New Hampshire this month, federal prosecutors said they had identified more than 15 bank accounts associated with her from 2016 to the present, including at banks based in the UK and Switzerland. The accounts held balances of more than $20 million, they said. Well, you know what I think about that stuff. Anytime someone has one of these kind of offshore accounts and the money they account for is, say, $25 million, I'd say double it, at least. And that's how much money they have when you count the hidden money, the unaccounted for money, the dark money, the laundered money. Prosecutors also said that more than $20 million was transferred from offshore accounts associated with Epstein to several associated with Maxwell between 2007 and 2011, with millions of dollars later transferred back. They didn't identify any banks involved in the transfers. So again, when we're talking about a RICO case, here are all your hallmarks. This money being transferred back and forth between them, $20 million from offshore accounts. If any of those offshore accounts were seedy, if any of those offshore accounts were involved in financial crimes, then all of Maxwell's money should be seized anyway. She shouldn't be able to put any of it up as bail. It should be seized by the government because it was gained via ill-gotten activities. Ill-gotten gains is what they're called. And the government sure does love to kick in doors of drug dealers' houses, don't they? They love to seize the cars of people who live in South Central, don't they? Or the homes that their mothers live in because they're suspected drug dealers. Well, Ghislaine Maxwell is a suspected human trafficker and a suspected child molester. So why haven't you seized her funds yet? That two-tier justice system right there for everybody to take a look at. Maxwell was ultimately cut off by at least one of her banks in 2019. Her lawyer, Mark Cohen, of Cohen and Gresser, LLP, told a federal judge last week. Cohen added that Epstein's arrest last summer caused her bank at the time to drop her, forcing her to transfer hundreds of thousands of dollars to another institution. The lawyer didn't identify the bank. When the bank drops you, you have to transfer your funds out. That's true. That's what happened, Cohen said. Oh yeah, that's all it was. Just a very, very easy explanation. Maybe a couple of 100,000, but what about the millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars that were transferred from Epstein companies to Maxwell's accounts? There's no getting away from that, folks, okay? That needs to be zeroed in on, circled, bullseyed, and all of it. Because these financial ties, well, they're the ties that bind. And I've said it from the very beginning. If you want to hold any of these enablers accountable for anything that they've done within Jeffrey Epstein's criminal enterprise or while associating with him, then we're going to have to go the financial route. And if these articles are going to tell the tale, if these articles are giving us just a glimpse into the mountain of evidence that is readily available for forensic accountants, 2021 is going to be a very, very long year for the remaining Jeffrey Epstein associates. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. And if you've emailed me in the last week or so, I'm trying to get back to answering all of those, but there has been a big-time clip of emails coming my way. So I'm going to try and get them all answered by Wednesday the latest, and we'll begin the process all over again as they keep coming in. All right, folks, I hope you all had a fantastic Christmas. I hope you're all enjoying your weekend so far. And as for me, well, I'll be back later on, and we'll pick right back up where we left off.